Welcome, everybody, to the Living the Gimmick podcast, where the takes are hot, the debates are real, and just like the best in the business, we never break kayfabe.
Now give me 2 taps and a Ric Flair.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Tay.
It's your neighborhood Uncle Trapp.
And shout out to Teddy Royce, who is producing for us today. Welcome in. Y'all, we have an exciting episode today.
Yes, we do.
We have a special guest. You see, we got the headphones on. You see, we got the setup. Okay, we have a special guest today. So before we introduce him, I just want to thank our sponsors, Kairos Media, 11th Avenue Staging, Perry Fitness, all of the things. Thank y'all so much for y'all's love and y'all's support. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest, George Pantas. Our special guest today is George Pantas. George has worn many hats throughout his diverse career, making a lasting impact in the world of professional wrestling and beyond. As a pro wrestling documentarian, his footage has been featured in WWE's A&E Biographies, Most Wanted Treasures, and Rivalries, as well as Dark Side of the Ring on Vice TV, Peacock, ESPN, and various independent wrestling documentaries. Beyond documenting wrestling history, George has been deeply involved in the industry as a Virginia wrestling promoter, sports entertainer, and the commissioner for Virginia Championship Wrestling. His talents extend far beyond the ring. He's also a stage, TV, and movie actor, an educator, a motivational speaker, a columnist for the flagship newspaper, and a natural-born storyteller. Y'all, we are so excited to have him on the show today. Everybody, welcome George Pantas.
Yay. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing?
How are you today?
I am doing great. So excited to be here. Very grateful, very thankful. Thank you for inviting me, and I can't wait to share stories, not only about wrestling, but some other nice little surprises as well.
I love a good surprise, but thank you so much for coming. We are honored to have you here, and we're going to get into it. Travis?
Listen, before we get started, I'm so excited about this episode just because of who he is, and to know someone who was just deep involved into the business the way he has been is just a treat for us over here at Living the Gimmick to have you on as our very, very first guest, and can't thank you enough for being on the show with us today.
Yeah, for sure.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. So wait. So I'm the inaugural guest on this show?
Yes,
oh, my
sir.
God.
Number one.
That's number. Oh, it's funny you should say number one. Do you remember anything about George Pantas and number one?
Oh, you had a back in when I was in school. You were my principal, and you used to have a really, really good intro. And I do believe, if you don't mind, could you give us that?
Yes.
Oh, I would love to. And it goes something like this. My name's number one, Mr. P. I'm the best there is, best there was, best there'll ever be. Often imitated, never duplicated. Number one, Mr. P, that's me. You've heard 007? I'm 0014, twice as bad as 007. You're the nature boy, Ric Flair. I'm the nature man. Woo! Number one, Mr. P, that's me, but that's my old name. My new name is Master P, because I'm bowdy, and rowdy. Hooey, hoo! And I jizzle because I'm P, jizzle. Woo!
Woo! I love it. I'm about it. Okay. I see you, Mr. P. I see you. I love that.
part of my career, as you mentioned, I was an educator, and I realized quickly if I wanted the students to realize that this is not your regular teacher, we're going to have fun and we're going to learn, was I needed to hook them. So even prior to Uncle Trapp and I getting to know each other, I was a teacher before I became an administrator, and it actually blossomed. I started with just the first sentence or two, and then my students, my high school students, caught on and was like, have you thought of adding this? Have you thought of adding this? And then before you know it, the one that I wound up sharing with everybody. Thank you for asking me to share it. I haven't said that in a while.
Well, it came out very seamless. Like
It really did.
You didn't miss a beat at all.
Like
Yes,
literally at all. I love it.
Yeah. So of course we'll start, at the beginning. Like what was the moment that made you fall in love with professional wrestling?
So, and of course I've shared the story before in some of the other podcasts. I'm going to condense it a little bit here. But the short version is my father came over I was born in Greece, and came to America when I was 10 years old. My father came over in 64, brought us, my mother, sister, and I in 66 over. And one day I was changing channels, and I, very important, did not speak a word of English. And I'm changing channels, and all of a sudden I see these guys rolling around, and even though I didn't understand what they were saying, I realized that it was a form of wrestling. And of course, the Greeks invented wrestling like we invented everything else. Roman wrestling, Olympics and so on. So it was something that I was very familiar with. And that literally grabbed my attention. And then I would watch it and enjoy it and attempt to talk about it with my friends. And then I finally understood, because back then what they would do is they would literally, so I grew up, for our listening audience, I grew up in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, the city of Hampton, and in the wrestling world, the Hampton Coliseum, the Norfolk Scope has seen some incredible matches and pay-per-views, both from back then, the NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, and up now, of course, with WWE. So, but in those days, all we knew was about Jim Crockett Promotions, and they would come every second Thursday. They would actually come to the Norfolk Scope, and then once a month they would come to the Hampton Coliseum. And so my father, I explained to my father how much I was enjoying this, and then once I was able to get a driver's license and drive the car, I was the first in our family to do that, by the way. My father was like, as long as you keep your grades up, you can go to the matches. And so, and at that time that was the only really sports that catered to us. We did have the Virginia Squires basketball team, but Dr. J, a legend, but it did not last long. So if you wanted to see stars on TV live, wrestling was the only game in town. And so I fell in love with it, loved it from day one, watching it, and just the whole excitement. And back then, they focused on wrestling, and it was just something that I was drawn immediately to. And I'm sure you're going to ask me who did I really enjoy seeing. So I'm going to just go ahead and say that I fell in love with the one, the only, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Woo! Which is why promo, right?
Right.
And then really fast forwarding our story, but call it a teaser for our audience listening, to be able to now call Rick a dear friend and pull him up on the phone and text each other. And I was blessed to be at his last pay-per-view that he did, his last match. And
Yes.
And it's, honest to goodness, I still pinch myself that Rick just texted me back. It's why America is such a great country. And I have preached this lesson to my students, that do we have problems? I will keep this very PG. Heck yeah, we have problems. But as Harley Ray said, we're still the best place in God's green earth because it gives us opportunities to do so much with our lives. Look at you guys. Look at the three of you. Teddy, I understand, is producing this. Thank you, Teddy, if you can hear me, for producing this.
He says thank you. He says you're welcome.
My pleasure. And here you are, doing this podcast. Here I am, a little boy that came not speaking a word of English, having a tremendous story to tell when it comes to professional wrestling and some of the other things. And it's because America gives us the opportunity. I always said to my seniors, as long as you're not afraid to work, you can either find a job, and if you can't find a job, you can create your own job. You guys have created this beautiful podcast. I wish you much success. And I already heard you have sponsors, which means you're making money. And that's awesome. Yes. So congratulations on that. And you honestly just proved my point. So
right.
So I say all that to say that's what made me fall in love. And it was Johnny Valentine, a very old school name,
yes,
who was on TV bragging about. Now, on TV, they told us it was his brother, but in reality, it was his son, Greg Valentine. But we didn't know any better back then. So he was, and at that time, Ric Flair and Greg Valentine were the tag team champions. And even though they were bad guys, because I liked Johnny Valentine so much, when Johnny put over and was saying, "Look at these young lions! Look at what they can do in the ring, and they're world champions." And then seeing Ric Flair with the young ladies, well, that did it for me.
Absolutely.
That'll do it. I think it did it for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that Rick and Greg were tag team partners. You hear not a lot of viewers or listeners really understand that, like, the parallels between the superstars that we grew up watching or grew up hearing. Like, for instance, even to this day, there are a handful of people that did not know that Sting and Ultimate Warrior were tag partners before they went their separate ways. So when you look at both of them on television, you see similarities with the face paint, with the beating on the chest, just being very vibrant. It just dawned on me when you said that Rick and Greg were tag partners. Now I understand why both of them used the figure 4 leg lock.
Exactly. And they had the robes. They had
exactly
hair parted in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, there's a great picture that I have that I took with Rick. I took on with Greg as well. And there's some great stories I can share about Greg also, and Rick. But there's a picture that I've posted on Facebook that it's me and Rick, late 70s, in the back of the Hampton Coliseum. Now, if you can see, my hair, although gray now, is parted. My hair has always parted on the side, except when I wanted to be like Rick so bad that I grew it longer. I parted in the middle, and because I just knew in my mind I was that nature boy. I was the nature man.
I was just about to say, you were the nature man, okay? Don't downplay yourself.
That's right.
So, Mr. Pantas, what is one of your favorite memories from, from your history just in the wrestling business?
If we go back to the very beginning, it's the friend, like you hear podcasters like myself and others who understand the business say that wrestling is not about winning and losing. It's about creating moments. And I believe that with all my heart. And to answer your question, it's about those moments, those memories that I have of slowly working my way to the wrestlers feeling comfortable with me enough to trust me and talk with and have conversations with them. Because back in those days, it's not like the security we have today. It was just not a rope, but whatever that thing is called that we see like at a bank that's, that does the zigzag line. And that's all really that separated the fans from the from the wrestlers. And
Wow.
my story is unique in that, and I'll do my best to do the short version, in that there's a reason why, and I thank you for that beautiful introduction, that I do consider myself a documentarian, because I've always loved, I very much feel like a frustrated director. I've always had a camera in my hand, film or video, and back then I was able to take my camera to the matches and film and I started with a little regular 8mm camera, eventually silent. Film was very expensive then, and we were very poor. Eventually, I got Super 8, which gave it better quality, still silent, and then graduated to Super 8 sound. And what I was able to do is become friends with the promoter. So the way that the wrestling business works is you have the Jim Crockett who owns the business, but then he needs promoters in the different cities to get the word out. And
Right.
so there was a gentleman named Joe Murnick, and he oversaw our area, Richmond. That was the other thing that I left out. So they would Thursday night they were at the Norfolk Scope. Friday they were over at the Richmond Coliseum. And so Mr. Murnick would oversee the whole area. And Mr. Murnick was friends with the sports editor of the Daily Press newspaper, because they would, back then, they used the TV to promote the show, and they also used the newspaper. And so Mr. Murnick and the sports editor were good friends. The sports editor happened to be an older gentleman. When I say older for me, he was a young man, but I was a teenager. He was a grown man from my church. And I happened to be at one of the Hampton Coliseum shows. Tony Anthony was his name. Tony and Mr. Murnick were there together. I ran into Tony. Tony introduced me to Mr. Murnick and said, "George is a dear friend. Please take good care of him." And though that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship, because Mr. Murnick, even though, tell the world again the name of your podcast.
Living the Gimmick.
Living the Gimmick. And where kayfabe, you said something else about kayfabe. What did you say about kayfabe?
We don't break kayfabe.
Okay. So back then, kayfabe was real. They didn't break it for anybody. Yet, because of Mr. Murnick being the head honcho, and because Tony asked him to take good care of him, and Mr. Murnick at that time was in his 60s, and again, I'm a teenager, he allowed me to take my Super 8 camera and sit next to the ring announcer by the ring apron, which is why years later, when I sold some of my footage, I still have some, to WWE and others, and work deals with other companies for them to use it, it's because my footage is that amazing. It's by the ring apron. When they came out and fought outside, I followed them around. And God blessed me. I had put them away for many years, and I decided about 10 years ago to kind of look at the footage, and it was perfect. It was like nothing had ever happened to them. And so because of that, I have footage of the young Ric Flairs, of the young Greg Valentines, Ricky Steamboats, Black Jack Mulligan, Wahoo McDaniel. We can go on and on.
Wow.
And it's amazing footage. There's one thing I want to brag about. It was just one little Super 8 camera. But what I was astute enough to figure out, back in those days, it wasn't the fast pace that we see today. Okay? So if they put you in a headlock, they kept you in that for a couple of minutes.
Right.
So if I'm sitting at ringside and I have a shot of Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat in a headlock, I knew I could get up real quick, run up the stairs on the other side, get another, shoot a little film from that angle, come back, and the person looking at my footage would think I have like 2 or 3 cameras working, but in reality, it was just using my brain and just realizing the little tricks that I could do to make it look like there were multi-cameras, when in reality it was just one. So it was little tricks like that, or maybe get a quick shot of the audience and then come back to the ring. And I'm very proud of my footage, which is why when, especially WWE saw it, it's my favorite part of telling the story is that Hunter himself told the archivist, Ben Brown, and if you've watched any of these treasure shows that we talked about, Ben is the one in the warehouse that told Ben, do whatever you got to do to make this happen. I want this footage, and to I have goosebumps just saying that, and to know that Hunter, who I knew was a huge historian of wrestling, and he loved Ric Flair, and I had a lot of Ric Flair footage. So I knew once if we could get to him, they would want it. It's God is good every day,
Yes.
and to paraphrase Rick, and twice on Sunday, and so it's just one of those that because of that, it opened so many doors for me in so many ways, because it built the friendships with the wrestlers, which then led to promoting and them trusting that I would present them properly. And it's just, one beautiful relationship after another. But it was a process. I learned the hard way. This is another story I like telling real quick. So I've always liked the bad guys. And so Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole and Gene Anderson, with Ole Anderson being the original Rock. And so Gene was in the back, and I was so excited. I must have been like 14. I was so excited. He was right by the ropes. I just stepped right over to go over. In my head, I was going to say, hello, Mr. Anderson. I'm a huge fan of yours, sir. And all I said is, ha. And he goes, and I'm going to clean it up real nice here. Get the blankety blank out of my blankety blank face. He was heel to the heel. Okay. But at that point, I was so scared, I just took off running. But once I processed it, I'm like, well, he doesn't know me. He doesn't know that Mr. Murdoch is okay with me talking to him and stuff.
Right.
So it connected in my head. Okay, if I want to talk to Gene, I need to see me talking to Mr. Murdoch or talking to a Ric Flair or Greg Valentine, because then that's the trust factor. Right. So it was a process, but I'll pat myself on the back like Barry Horowitz.
Oh yeah.
That I was astute enough to figure that out. The other thing is that I wanted them to remember me, and they meet thousands of people. How are they going to remember George Pantas? But everybody had a handle. Everybody had that nickname. The Nature Boy Ric Flair, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. So being Greek, and at that time there was a very famous sportscaster on ESPN called Jimmy the Greek. And so, okay, perfect. So I would literally introduce myself, not as George Pantas. I would introduce myself, hi, I'm George the Greek. And I believe really that stuck with them because it was something different that they weren't used to hearing. So that's how I got to have my special moments with a lot of them because of that.
That's amazing. I wanted to ask you, because you did touch on just something as the difference in camera angles and how it is now as opposed to like how you did it and how people thought you had multiple cameras and maybe 2 or 3 people working it. What is the biggest difference that you've seen between the eras that you grew up in and working as opposed to what you see today?
The biggest one, of course, is as far as the actual in-ring wrestling would be the fast pace of the matches. Also, for lack of a better word, more blood, more hardcore. Back then, they really did rely more on wrestling, and it was more slower paced. Fans were used to seeing 20, 30, 40-minute matches. As a matter of fact, my favorite match of all time was Ric Flair at the Norfolk Scope, Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat into a 1-hour draw. Think about that, okay? This isn't the boxing with taking breaks and everything else. And they had to keep that audience captivated for an hour. And so when I saw that, I was, oh, this is it. This is my favorite match ever. I can't believe this is amazing. I got to see it. And then they came back 2 weeks later and they did an hour and a half draw. So that became my favorite match. And by the way, both of those, I filmed portions of them. I don't have them anymore. WWE has them, but there's documentation. Because really, when you go back now with all these podcasts and you hear Rick or Ricky Steamboat talk about those days, most people talk about the trilogy of matches that they had in the late 80s. But you also, when they're pressed, they say, yes, those were great matches that we had, but we had even better matches in the arena back in the 70s. I got to see them and blessed enough to have some of that footage that now the WWE owns. So it was a slower pace. I know it was a long, roundabout answer to your question, but to me, that's the biggest difference. Now the audience needs almost immediate satisfaction, and that kind of takes away, because we were able to see a story. Not that we understood it was a story back then. It was just, oh my God, this is amazing. What's going to happen next? But they were able to drag their time with it and let us enjoy it and be a part of it. Now, sometimes I'll see something on TV. I keep looking this way because that's where my TV is. We'll see what looks to me, oh, this has the potential of being a great storyline. And then 2 weeks later, they're done with it already for whatever reason they choose to stop it. So that's part of that. I wish that they would take more time to develop those stories. I'm a huge fan of WWE. I really do enjoy AEW, but I wish they would do more of that as well. That they would actually have storylines that drag further, rather than you'll see something and then it'll kind of just drop for whatever reason. I wish they would have that continuity. They're coming. Actually, I'll put a plug in because I believe that wrestling is wrestling, and I hope everyone listening here that they support all wrestling, because that's how these young men and young women make a living. And so actually AEW is coming to the Chartway Arena April the 30th. And the fans around are very, very excited that they're coming back. They try to come back to us here 2 or 3 times a year, which is amazing. So I hope, and the cool thing is with wrestling today, Tay, to kind of work that in as well, is, for example, when I was at back in August at the last AEW show at the Chartway Arena, I was talking to some of the fans. This one guy told me he came from South America. Some other guy drove from Philly, and these are fans now. We're not talking wrestlers that were working the card. These are fans. So that's the good thing, and I think it is important that they support it, and just as important as supporting the independent wrestling, which I'm still a part of with our Virginia Championship Wrestling.
Got you. Yeah, and you really touched on the storytelling piece that's different from then versus now. To you, what makes a good storyline?
Someone years ago said this is like the soap operas that we watch during the day, only those soap operas are geared more for the women in the audience. Mm-hmm. In the traditional years long ago, the men worked and the women stayed home to raise the children, so that's why the soap operas were geared to them. I don't think that's as true as now as it is back then. So wrestling was the soap opera for the men, with the wrestling, with the violence, with the moves, with the action, and everything else that goes with it. So I guess sidetracked. So ask me your question again.
To you, what makes a good storyline? Yeah.
That it hooks me and I want to know more. I'm looking at that beautiful belt that you have in front of you there with the tribal chiefs. I can never pronounce the word. What do they call that?
it's the Ulafala, but these are Kukui necklaces.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
So the difference is the Ulafala is made out of a certain it's called the panduas fruit, and you dry it out, and it's about that long, and it's a totally different shape. It's about this long. They dry it out or dehydrate it rather, and then they dip it in red paint, and that's where the Samoan, you see it in like with Roman, and you saw it with Umaga when he was wrestling. They don that. It's a bigger situation. It's a bigger necklace.
Mm-hmm.
This right here is it's a kukui nut, and mostly you'll see the Hawaiians like wear that.
Okay, very good. So, and thank you for the lesson. When I was in the classroom, one of the things I told students, and also at Spratly Middle School, where you and I met, my friend, that my goal I have many goals in life, but one of them is to learn at least one thing today that I did not know yesterday. And honestly, I never, took the time to do the research of the history. So thank you for that history lesson. I appreciate it. Much love.
Yes, thank you. You taught me something today.
Yeah, that's one thing. He's very that's very true what he said. It's learn something new every day. Don't make it a wasted day.
Right.
And
Amen.
it's something that I always took from back then all the way to now.
Yeah.
Amen. So the storyline by definition is a story that goes on and on and on. Being Greek, of course, the Greek mythology. Mm-hmm. And I do thank you for including the word storyteller in your introduction with me, because I do consider myself, and I heard you say you guys are storytellers as well, and you're proving that right now with what we're doing. In the traditional sense of storytelling, look at the Greek mythology and how everything's connected together with the gods and the heroes and the clash between them, and it just goes on and on and on and on. The bloodline is a perfect example, as Paul Heyman says, of how you think it's over? Oh no, we're probably in chapter 3. We still have many chapters to go,
Mm-hmm.
and so that to me is compelling television. That I want to know what's going to happen next week. Tease me with something to hook me. So, I got to watch this, or if I can't watch it, let me go on YouTube and catch the highlight of what I missed. For those that maybe don't have a Hulu or whatever to see them. So it's continuity. One of my favorite angles back then, they had when I was watching as a fan and believing everything that I saw. They had Paul Jones, who was the first one to come up with number 1. So that number 1 actually he called himself number 1 Paul Jones. And so I stole that from him. So Paul Jones and his partner, the Nelson Royal, had a match, and so which one got messed up? It was Nelson Royal that didn't show up, and Paul had to fight against the masked Infernos by himself. And then at a certain point, Nelson Royal comes in, clothes all torn, and he jumps in and starts beating up the other guys, and of course they disqualify he came in with a board. I honestly haven't told this story because I haven't thought about it for 40 years. He came in with a board, and he was just swinging it. And as soon as he brought the board, the referee disqualified the match. And but then they were able to take that and tell the story of how he had a flat tire and he got jumped, but the guys had masks and he knew who they were, and so he came, and they carried that for weeks and weeks and months actually, and they were able to take that around the loop and have compelling wrestling matches in the arenas, which is the whole concept back then. It was getting those fans to show up in the arena with paid tickets so they could make their money.
Got you.
Well, it's funny you mentioned it's funny you mentioned Paul. Like, how did that relationship form, so to speak? Like, how did that relationship between you and Paul, like, how did y'all first meet?
So Paul and I actually met back when he was in WCW. And eventually, as I got older, I was trusted more with things. I would go to the back, and whether it was grabbing a drink for somebody or taking the jackets back or giving rides to the hotel. And he and I had met back then. Not superficial. I don't want to give the impression that, we were hanging out or anything like that. The hanging out part was more earlier than that, with a Greg Valentine, with a Tully Blanchard, with a Ric Flair, J.J. Dillon, and so on. So with Paul, we simply had met when he was managing the Dangerous Alliance. And then we reconnected back in 2019. SmackDown came to the scope. And thanks to Ben Brown, I was able to go to the back and see some of my friends, and Paul was one of them. So we reconnected there. And I'll say this a little bit. I won't say too much. But now we're able to talk like in Messenger on Facebook. I'll say something, he'll respond back, and vice versa. And it's been beautiful to rekindle that connection. And then the coolest part was that I was at SummerSlam in 2022, and I went there with George Napolitano. George Napolitano and Bill Apter were the famous photographers and wrestling writers for the magazines, which was the only way we as fans back in the 60s and 70s and even up to 80s were able to know what was happening with wrestling before cable introduced us to everything else. And so there's a young man over there taking pictures with George Napolitano, and George is a very, very dear friend of mine, and so is Bill Apter. And we got to talking, and he goes, "Hi, what's your name?" "Chris." "Hi, Chris. Chris, what do you do? Who are you shooting for?" And Chris goes, "Oh, I shoot for Paul Heyman." Like, wait a minute. So that was really cool to realize that Paul had his own personal photographer, and right. Chris was the one, and so that was nice. And then when you called me to set up this interview, you shared something about Chris with me, which I think is worth retelling here.
Yes. So last year, of course, as avid pro wrestling fans, like a dream of ours is to finally make the big show, as far as like being able to go to WrestleMania. You can go to a Raw, SmackDown, whatever house show, but WrestleMania is always the ticket. Like, man, I want to go. So last year I was blessed enough to go with two good friends of mine. And as I had a connector in Atlanta. So I flew from here to Atlanta, and as we're getting on the plane, there's a guy standing behind me. And everybody's kind of making these comments like, "So you going to Mania?" Because everybody's on their way to Philly, like, right, on this flight. They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Of course we're going to Mania. Of course we're going to Mania." So me and him struck up a conversation, and he said to me, I was like, "So what are you doing there?" He was like, "Oh, well, I'm a photographer." I was like, "Okay, cool." He was like, "Hey, actually, I'm Paul's photographer." I was like, "Who, Paul Heyman?" He goes, "Yeah, I am." I was like, "Oh, okay, well that's pretty cool." So then he got to talking to me about how he, him and Paul met up, and it was, I guess, NXT was, they had a show, and Paul had reached out to him, and that shot of Paul and Braun Breaker, that's his photo. So I was like, "Oh man, like that's a pretty nice shot." So then I said, I was like, "Yeah," like he's like, "Well, how long you been a fan?" I'm like, "I've been a fan all my life." And I was like, funny enough, I'm like, my sixth grade principal, he knows Paul, and he goes, "Oh yeah, what's his name?" So I told him your name. He goes, "Wait a minute, I know George." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "How did you?" He was like, "He's in Virginia, right?" I was like, "Yeah, that's him." So that's how so we literally got from we were waiting to get on our seats. We ended up sitting together on the plane as fate would have it. And we, mind you, I had been up since about 4 a.m. catching flights. So I had this plan that once I got on the plane, I'm going to sleep until I get to Philly, because I knew once I touched down to Philly, it was going to be no sleep.
That's right.
When me and him struck up that conversation, we talked the entire time before the plane took off, when the plane was in the air, when we landed. We went our separate ways. Of course, when the plane landed, he had to go do his thing. I went to my room, and we ended up exchanging information on the plane. And I was like, man, so a few months went by. I'm like, man, I wonder how Chris is doing. So I went kind of look him up, couldn't find him. And then one day I get a message on my instant messenger on Instagram. He goes, Travis, please tell me this is you. I said, man, I've been looking for you. So I've been looking for you. So like, we've been in touch, quite often. Like he'll, like the shots that, or the concept that ideas that he has and things like that, he'll share them with me. And, I've shared them with my team here, from time to time. And he's a really, really good dude. He's a really good dude. I like him a lot.
Same here. And thank you for not telling me all of this when we talked the other day. I love hearing it right now for the first time. He really is an amazing young man. And I can't wait when this, Teddy, can you, I don't know the right terminology here, save this clip for me and send it to me, or post it where I can copy it, and we can send it to Chris, because I want definitely Chris to see this, that we're talking about him. It's such a small world. God is good every day.
Absolutely.
Every day.
Absolutely.
Every single day. So, Mr. Pantas, let's talk about the indie scene, your promotion in Virginia. What made you decide to step into that side of the business?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So because of the way that you phrased your question, I got to go back a little bit. And so it's 89, 90. I'm changing channels on TV. And on our local NBC affiliate, where back prior to that, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling was coming on, Jim Crockett Promotions, there's this wrestling show on there called South Atlantic Professional Wrestling. And I was just 90, I'm an adult. And so I knew right away, they're not just showing this to be showing it. If they're showing it, they want to start running shows here. And so, and thank God they ran credits at the end, like, WWE started showing now, doing a little bit there with Paul's name and that other gentleman's name that they show at the very end. So I look, and it said that this show was coming from North Carolina. And so I reached out to the local station, and I said, look, I want to promote this. At that point, I was teaching during the day, and in the evenings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I was night school principal for the adult program over in Portsmouth, which meant I had an access. And that's another blessing that God really blessed me with, is to help grown folk, for lack of a better word, who, life gets in the way, but God bless adult education that gives them the opportunity to get that diploma, whether it's a GED or whatever, high school diploma, and go on and further their education. And that was honestly my way of getting my foot in the door, because I wanted to move up in administration. And so that was a way of me proving who I was in that world. But in the wrestling world, that meant I had access to a gym. And so they gave me a phone number. I reached out to that promotion, and as fate would have it, the person that answered the phone was that number one Paul Jones that I talked about earlier. So now, he said that he remembered me. He remembered Miss George the Greek and all that, after kind of prompted his memory. I try to be as truthful as I can on these things, given my memory, but I really think he was just being nice, because it wasn't like he and I hung out or anything. But I took it because I knew that was an opening for me to start promoting. And so the wrestling coach at that time, this was Manor High School. Now it's called Wilson High School. But the wrestling coach and I had become friends. And so basically we promoted South Atlantic Wrestling at the school with a portion of the money going to the wrestling team. His name is Tony Reynolds, an amazing young man there. Now, we're the same age. Now he's running AAU for the youth in this area. Just an amazing human being and a very, very dear friend, Tony Reynolds, Coach Tony Reynolds. And so Paul and I worked out a deal. We promoted. This is a great story. So we promote the show that's going to come to Manor High School. I'm on radio. I'm in newspaper. I'm on TV. Come the night of the show, on the news, the weatherman says, Don Slater, my buddy, says, do not go out. They were calling severe thunderstorms, rain, tornadoes, you name it. So I'm like, oh my God, no, this is going to be horrible. We still had over 300 people show up, and it was amazing. And this is the coolest part. The main event, we had a semi-main event and a main event. The semi-main, and we had a battle royal, and it was an amazing card. The semi-main event was Paul Jones versus Robert Fuller, who would be Colonel, what do they call him? Colonel Parker?
Rob Parker.
Yes, okay. And the main event, are you ready for this? Let's see. So I'm going to say their wrestling names back then and see if either any of the three of you will recognize who they are in real life, because in the world of wrestling, because they went on to become major superstars. So my main event was the War Eagle Chris Chavis challenging for the South Atlantic Professional Wrestling heavyweight title against Vince Torelli.
So Chris Chavis is Tatanka.
Excellent. And Chris Chavis Tatanka, before you go to Vince, Chris Chavis Tatanka went to what high school in what city? I'll give you a hint. You know the city very, 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 very well.
So he went to so he was in Hampton?
He was in the city of Hampton.
And did he go to Hampton High?
Not Hampton High. At that time, now Hampton's rival is Bethel. I gave it away. I can't believe it.
So he went to Bethel?
He went to Bethel. Yeah.
I was going to say, wait a minute. I know he didn't go to Phoenix. Hold on. Like, he went to Bethel. Okay.
I started to say now the rivalry is Hampton High School and Phoebus High School, but back then it was Phoebus.
Okay.
I messed it up again. Back then it was Bethel. Okay. Ellen Iverson. We can go down that rabbit hole when you have me on for part 2 of this of our interview. Yes. So how cool is that? Yes. Chris went to Bethel High School. He was a big football star and a wrestler, and actually, not that I helped him get into WWE, WWF back then. I don't want to give that impression. But when he signed on his own, but they wanted to come up with something. Before they came up with the Tatanka and Chris, his real name is Chris Chavis. He really is a full-blooded Lumbee Indian. Because of his football background, they actually wanted him to present like a football gimmick. Mm-hmm. And Chris called me up, and because once we promoted that show, Chris and I, because of that Hampton connection, we became very, very good friends, and we are to this day. And so I actually went over to Bethel High School and talked to Coach Cos over there, the football coach, who was like a Mike Smith version for Bethel, and some of his teachers, and I lined it all up for WWF to come in and interview them, and they actually did. They went and they interviewed them to talking about Chris and his football career and so on, and that's what they were going to present. This is an exclusive, by the way. I've never told this story to anybody before. So you're getting an exclusive.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And so I guess somehow, I don't know the second half, but Chris told me, but I'm vaguely remembering they were asking him, well, tell us more about yourself. And once he mentioned about the whole true Indian heritage, they put aside the football gimmick and they went with Native American. And the rest, as they say, is as Chris come out that way, it's history. And so blessed to consider to have Chris as a very dear friend.
Yes, I remember the first time I was in your office. You actually gave me that photo.
What did you do? Wait a minute. What did you do to wind up in my office?
So this
Only
is
the
how
bad kids came to my office.
So I wasn't one of the bad kids, but I was doing the dumb things that middle school boys do, and it was a substitute teacher that day. They was like, we not have. So it took, and she sent 3 of us to your office. And
oh my God.
We had a very stern lesson on not and how disrespectful us doing spitballs were. So very stern lesson. Like I didn't do another spitball after that conversation.
For real?
No, for real, absolutely. I was like, I don't.
God bless you.
It was so. I was like, nah, this is so disrespectful. So then I'm looking, and I'm kind of looking around the office, and before we left, I said, that's when I asked. I was like, you sound like a wrestling announcer. Like, did you ever? And that's when he kind of let the cat out the bag. Hey, this is what I was involved in. I was like, do it. So then we had started striking up a conversation, and he brings out a photo, black and white photo of him in Tatanka when he was War Eagle, and he had on his the black and white tux.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And he was calling by his first name and everything like that. I'm like, that's amazing. Like Tatanka is actually one of my, probably one of the many action figures I have multiples of. So he was like, hey, so he signs it and he just gives it to me. And I'm like, he's like, take it. And I was like, oh, well thank you. So I still have that. It's like a lot of the things like the action figures and the autographed pictures that I had when I was growing up. They're literally all at my grandmother's house down the street from Spratly.
Oh, that's
still there.
The next time you go to Hampton, you got to find it and take a picture.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I might just bring that stuff home. Because now that, now I have somewhere that
to put it.
I got to start bringing that stuff home because I have Ivan Koloff autograph. I met him when I was like 6-7 years old at the Walmart on Mercury. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So that it was that long ago. Right where, so at the Hampton Coliseum, how the parking is and the convention center is now.
Yes.
Well, there used to be a set of apartments called Pine Chapel Apartments over there. The Hampton Coliseum was my backyard. So we used to live over there. And the Walmart, me and my mother used to walk to that Walmart all the time to get groceries. And this particular day, Ivan Koloff was in there. And struck up a conversation because I had a lot of old tapes. So I was like, I knew who he was. And he gave me his autograph. And that's like the very first wrestling autograph that I have. So I got to start bringing that stuff back home here.
Yes, you would definitely have to do that. So finishing up the story with Chris. So if I remember correctly, the Xerox copy that I gave you already had probably Chris's autograph on there. And then I signed it as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. It's two signatures on.
Well, that's so cool. Yeah, you just gave me goosebumps. That's so cool. Let me do my rock imitation.
Oh my goodness, this is.
But I really do have goosebumps. So thank you for sharing that story.
No problem. But to go back to what you were saying, so Chris is Tatanka and
yes,
Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, you're the man. Yes,
that was Teddy. That was Teddy.
That was my main event.
That's amazing.
Yes,
Ken Shamrock is like one of my favorites.
Yeah,
Man.
How amazing is that? How amazing!
I know.
When I
say very blessed, I truly am very blessed.
Yes.
I didn't know that he was involved that early. because when I first seen Ken Shamrock, it was the UFC
Yeah.
situation, and see that's the part I didn't know. That part about Ken I didn't know because I only seen him, from what I thought was his first introduction
Mm-hmm.
to wrestling.
I didn't hear what Teddy said. What did Teddy say?
Teddy said that he was like, yeah, he started wrestling before he went to the UFC, and then once he left the UFC, he went back to wrestling, and then left wrestling to go back to the UFC, go back to MMA. So like he's been like kind of back and forth between the two. But I had no idea about that. That's something I didn't know.
But how did you? But I'm very impressed that you knew Vince Torelli and Ken Shamrock as the same human being. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, shout out to our producer Teddy today. He definitely brought that one because I was trying to figure out who it was.
All
and he
right,
was like, nah, that's Shamrock.
Well,
I'm not as big of a historian as these other two, but Ken Shamrock is one of my favorites from the 90s.
The only time, and the only thing, again, full disclosure, the only time I met him was that one time.
Mm-hmm.
But very down to earth. I had some of my students, because back then, as I said, I was teaching during the day. I was night school principal for the adult program. And of course, I was bragging about doing the show over there. And some of my students had come in a little bit early, and he was shooting basketball with them. So even though he was a bad guy, I asked him, I said, look, can you just shoot a couple of hoops? Because he was playing by himself with the kids, and he openly did that. So that was pretty cool. Very, very nice. And then seeing some of the stuff that he posts now on, social media, a family man, a loving man, a good human being. So let me add one more thing that, our brain cells and the way they connect. So to promote that show, I went down to North Carolina where they were filming some of their shows to air on TV, and I had a dream come true. So of course now we know about Jim Ross and all the different announcers, Tony Schiavone and all that. I grew up with a guy named Bob Caudle, and the voice of Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. Yeah. And at that time, when we're talking 90, 91, so Jim Crockett Promotions was sold to Ted Turner, and so Bob did some work for them, but then he stopped working for Turner. But he wanted to become the announcer for this South Atlantic Professional Wrestling. So when I went down there, all I wanted to do was promote my show coming up. But this is another one of these pinch me moments. I got to sit next to Bob Caudle at the ring, by the ring apron, while he was calling the action. And then he introduces me. And with us today is Virginia promoter George Pantas. George, tell us about the great events coming in your area. And like, the little kid in me, I just wanted to hug him, but I had to stay composed. It was incredible. And the action in the ring, I did back in those days. What they did is that literally they filmed 4 hours that then aired over a course of a month. And so for 2 of those 4 hours, he introduced me twice, is what I'm trying to say, for 2 different shows. For one of them, I was able to find the footage, and while Bob is saying all that, and then I'm coming back with the comments, in the ring is a very young, I'm going to butcher his name, because I want you to guess who it is, Rob Zogorzowski, versus the junior heavyweight champion, Ricky Nelson. Now, it's not fair because I didn't do a good job pronouncing his last name. But any idea who Rob, with last name Z, Zobrowski, or some, a Polish sounding name?
Is that Larry Zbyszko?
Rob is part of his real name and part of his wrestling name today.
Rob Van Dam.
Yes.
Oh, hey, good job. Yeah.
One and one.
Okay.
What?
Because I thought it was about to be another like Vince Torelli situation. I was like, no, like, well, he ended up saying that afterwards. So I was focused on the Z thing. I'm like, wait a minute, nah, as soon as I said Larry, I was like, nah, that's his real name, so that can't be him.
So good job,
Yeah.
Tay. So now it's a tie.
One.
Now it's a tie.
Yeah.
So you got Chris Chavis. You got Tatanka. You got Rob Van Dam, and Teddy got Vince Torelli. Yes, so it's a tie. We're going to have to figure out a tiebreaker later on.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We can
So
do
that's
that.
very
We can do
cool.
that.
So that's
This
very
is
cool.
bragging rights over
Actually,
here.
Literally.
not really getting off topic, but not really. Tommy Dreamer is a very dear friend, and I was telling Tommy, and he loves everything about Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. So I was telling him about this, and I sent him the video clip that I'm talking about now with Rob in the ring, and he's like, "Oh my God, George, I'm going to send it to him." And he sent it to Rob, and Rob loved it. So that's really cool. I have not been able to find the other episode footage, but that one, it's actually Chris Chavis in the ring, but I can't remember who it is. So again, I'll say it till the day I die. Very blessed, very blessed, very blessed.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
And now speaking about your promotion and everything like that, you have an event coming up on Saturday the 15th.
Thank you. Yes. So we are in the month of March. So this Saturday, fans, March 15th, Virginia Championship Wrestling, a promotion that next year we will be actually 30 years in the business of promoting. So that speaks volumes when it comes to independent promotions. And so we are doing a show at Hampton High School. We've been doing shows there for many years. From the time that I left, I went back over there to teach, and so promoting and not just promoting, but doing it as fundraisers for the school. And so we have a fundraiser for Hampton High School, and we're bringing in. Last year we had Magnum TA there. No, that's not true. The year before, we had Magnum TA there. Last year, as a special guest. Last year, we had Teddy Long. And this year, we're bringing in Nikita Koloff and Gilbert as well.
Yeah.
That's another one of my Gilbert.
Amazing.
And every time he comes out, I get a really good laugh. It's amazing. Gilbert is amazing.
And he's going to definitely entertain the fans. And so the fans will have an opportunity to come in, see amazing action. We have ladies matches. We are very, very much a family entertainment company. And so it's something that families can feel very comfortable bringing their young children to and enjoying great wrestling. And so we've been, thank God, build a loyal following, and because of that, we are able to provide fantastic entertainment like this, bring in wrestling names that, and the idea when you do that, quite honestly, for the fans listening, is we have a loyal fans. We know they're going to show up, but you always try to get someone new that has not seen the product. Just like hopefully you guys are, some of my former students will hopefully say, "Oh, Mr. Pantas did a podcast. Let me listen to it." And then they wind up becoming fans of your podcast, and it's a mutual, situation. And so same thing when we bring in a name. In the past, we've had Ric Flair, we've had Brutus the Barber, we've had, you name it, Roddy Piper. We had Roddy Piper at Hampton High School. We did an amazing storyline. Speaking of storylines, I had an amazing storyline that I want to tell, but I want to finish promoting what we're doing now. So Nikita will be there. Gilbert will be there. They'll take pictures. We'll have fantastic wrestling. We have heavyweight title matches, tag team matches, as I said, women matches, a little bit of everything for everyone. And fans listening to this, if you please go to our Facebook site, Virginia Championship Wrestling, and you'll see all the information. Ringside has been sold out. Let me take that back. I said it wrong. Front row. Because we also put chairs on the floor. It's inside the Hampton High School gymnasium. So The front row sold out, oh God, over a month ago. Ringside, when I checked this morning, I think maybe we had 6, 7 left on there. And then, of course, it's a gymnasium, so general admission will be the bleachers where fans can sit over there. And so the prices vary from $20 to $30, and then depending on the packages that they want to do with getting an autograph from even our own wrestlers, we have a following themselves, but obviously the big names like Nikita and Gilbert. And it's an opportunity for the fans to reconnect. And Nikita is a very, very, very dear friend of mine, very personable, a man of God, a man of strong faith. And I highly recommend those listening, especially those that are religious, that you Google Nikita Koloff and go to his website. You will be amazed with what he has done. He and Lex Luger, they do their Men Up camps, and they basically teaching the Bible for how to be a good man in the household. And I can go on and on forever. He's has a little prayer breakfast that he's doing that Saturday morning at one of the churches. And I'm sorry I don't have that note in front of me to say the church. But fans, if you go to my site on Facebook, I have that information. Go to Nikita's site. He has that information. Saturday morning, he's doing, like I said, a little breakfast, a men's breakfast, very, very small group for a nominal fee. And then that Saturday night, he'll be over at Hampton High School. So check us out, Virginia Championship Wrestling. And we just made a huge announcement yesterday, so I want to share that now.
Yes.
We our version of WrestleMania is called the Liberty Lottery, and that one is always in July. And it's sort of like I say our version of WrestleMania, but it's really more like the Royal Rumble. Okay, it's called the lottery because the fans legitimately will pick the wrestlers. So the wrestlers themselves do not know who's going to be first, second, third, and so on in going to the ring. And then, we have other matches, of course, but then that's like our big main event. And then the winner gets to choose a future title shot of their choice. And so this year, we just, like I said, made the announcement that we're going to be over in Portsmouth at their outdoor pavilion. This is a huge venue that brings in major. Lionel Richie has performed there. Rock stars have performed there. And now Virginia Championship Wrestling will be putting on a show over at this amazing pavilion. So we're very blessed, very fortunate to be able to do this. It's a huge step, a big feather in our cap. And check us out, fans. Next year will be even better with our 30th anniversary. So many things happening. Virginia Championship Wrestling. On YouTube also, you can see many of our matches, like mine when I was in Roddy Piper's pit over at Hampton High School.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes, going back to your storyline, we had a huge storyline involving myself where I lost. I was the Virginia Championship Wrestling Commissioner, and I lost my job, and I had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations. And my arch nemesis, Jerry Stephanicius, tricked me into signing a contract. I thought I was going to wrestle him, but come to find out, I had to wrestle the then VCW Tag Team Heavyweight Champions, the Whole Stars, and I had no choice but to go to the ring that night. But Roddy Piper saved the day. And what did he do? Well, fans, go to YouTube, type George VCW, type Roddy Piper, type George Pantas, and you can see it all right there.
And you know what? I'm gonna go watch it, and we'll leave it in the description. Okay. All of the information for the show on the 15th, that'll be in the description, everybody, as well as that video. I'm gonna find it. I gotta see it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Thank you very, very much. And so to kind of finish that, he saved me that day, but I still didn't have my my job back. And in order to get my job back, I eventually wound up having to wrestle for it. Now, let's be honest, I'm not a wrestler, but I went to wrestling school. I trained for months and months and months. And then we wound up having a six-man tag team match where on my team, I had the former VCW tag team champions, the set. And then Jerry, my arch nemesis, he had the current tag team champions at that time, the All Stars. And we had a beautiful six-man tag team match. That's also on YouTube. This was like my, I came out on a robe, you know, I was Ric Flair. I actually did decent in the match and got beat up pretty bad too. But let's just say there's a happy ending.
Good.
Yeah. Well, here's a question. If you had the power to change one major thing about professional wrestling today, what would it be and why?
Oh, my gosh. I don't think I've ever thought of that. Ask me one more time.
If you had the power to change one major thing about professional wrestling currently, what would it be and why?
If I could change only one thing. I love what they do now with the fans having access to the wrestlers. Now, granted, you have to pay. And granted, those fees are very, very high. And if you're just a regular fan that has a 9-to-5 job, it's very difficult to save to pay for that, especially if you have a wife and kids at home to justify it. So from a fan's perspective, I think I'm going to answer it two ways, and this is just me freestyling. From a fan's perspective, if they could find a way, and I understand about these $1 million contracts and so on that the wrestlers have, but at the same token, so does the WWE, so does AEW. They do have multi-million-dollar contracts themselves with the networks, and they get all this money. I wish they would find a way to make the ticket prices not as expensive as they are now. And then these packages of where you can meet some of the fans, not as expensive as it is now. So what would I change from a fan's perspective to give them the opportunity to meet the fans, but not cause them to spend several months' salary? I'm sure what you just said about going to WrestleMania in Philly last year, that cost you a pretty penny, from the flights, the hotel to the, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now, I've been blessed that when I go to these, part of the deal of me selling my footage to WWE is we worked out a deal to, if I want to go to WrestleMania, now, I guess let me say this, pre-TKO purchase, because I didn't ask. I'm dealing with some health issues, so I did not go to, I wasn't comfortable enough with all the movement to go to the Philly show. So I didn't ask this year. But up until before, part of the deal that I worked out was selling my footage is if I want to go to WrestleMania, I have 2 free tickets to WrestleMania. When they come to town, I get 4, 5, 6, 7, however many. I try not to be too greedy, but right. I get free tickets to the shows and access to the back and things like that. So when you add all that together, whatever price originally they paid me, it's been many, many, many thousands more, because that deal actually happened back 11 years ago now, 2014. So that's part of the, so I've been blessed enough to go to these, and it doesn't cost me anything, but at the same, and I knew, full disclosure, if I had to pay, there was no way I could afford to do this stuff. So that's why, Tay, I answered the question the way I did, that way for the fans, because at the end of the day, I consider myself a fan. And sometimes people throw the word mark out there. To me, a mark is a good word. It's not a bad word. We're all on marks for this business, or we wouldn't be loving it. You wouldn't be doing this podcast. I wouldn't be on here talking about it.
Absolutely.
And so even when I was involved with VCW more, I didn't finish that story because of dealing with some of my health issues. I actually wound up retiring as far as being an on-air personality as the commissioner. I still helped behind the scenes. You know, I was the one that got Nikita to come. And so I help in that regard and with the PR and other things like that. But I didn't want to be actively in front of the camera, because if you're there, then you got to do things. And I'm just not in a position to do those things. So I actually had David Crockett back last year come in, and we did a nice, very well program segment for me retiring. And David Crockett was there to see me off. And that evil Jerry Stefanicius had to interrupt and put his 2 cents in. And that's also on YouTube that you can see. So one is the fan. As far as in-ring, I'm just not. I enjoyed ECW for what it was back then, but I think I was also at a different stage in my life. I was younger. So I don't like this crazy hardcore now where they jump off and they use what do you call those not light bulbs, but the like CCW and the barbed wires and all that.
Oh yeah.
So that's just too much for me. What would I change? I would bring the business back to wrestling and entertainment. Yes, the marquee in the old days said wrestling, but nowadays we truly are. And if you want to hook the fans, sports entertainment. And it is a sport. No matter what people say, it is a sport. These are athletes of the caliber that a regular fan just has no idea. The first bump I took in learning to prepare for my match, I almost knocked myself out. They were saying, George, tuck your head. We're going to pick you up and throw you down. We're going to slam you. Tuck your head. Okay. I thought I was tucking my head. I didn't. And then I had stars and I had to stop. But so wrestling and entertainment together is what I would want to ensure continues with the business. And to not be so quick to have 2 and 3 minute matches. I would much rather see 8, 10, 12-minute matches where the wrestlers have the opportunity to paint that beautiful picture and tell that story than a quick, as much as I enjoyed, and I guess I'm contradicting myself a little bit, the 24/7 title thing that WWE did a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun, it was cute, but also I think they did it the right way, that it was boom, boom, and it was over. But when I see wrestlers in the ring, I want to see a match. I want to see them, continue that, whatever that feud happens to be. So storytelling, more, the matches themselves lasting longer, and with wrestling and entertainment combined together. And quite honestly, I do see that a lot in both promotions, WWE and AEW, with the matches lasting a relatively good length of time. I hope I answered your question.
You did. That's awesome. And then before we let you go, what's one piece of advice that you would give to someone looking to get into the business, whether it's as a talent on camera or behind the scenes, for someone who wants to get into the business? What would you tell them?
The importance of finding a very good wrestling school, whether you want to be a ring announcer. Oh, I have to brag about one of our ring announcers and commentators before I answer your question.
Yes.
For us, This young man got his start with Virginia Championship Wrestling. And so, this is going to be the tiebreaker. Okay, so Eddie, I hope you're listening. This is
listening.
The tiebreaker. Okay, so we had, past tense, a ring announcer and commentator by the name of Blake Chadwick. That's his real name. No Googling, Teddy.
His hand up.
He is no longer with us because he went on. This is just February, March. He's in his second year, going on third. He started in February with WWE as an announcer, as a commentator on NXT Level Up, and on the main event right now, and he's also now NXT. He's in the back when they do the interviewing. So who is this amazing young man who is in WWE now and is truly a WWE superstar already?
Byron.
He and Byron have not Byron, by the way, another Virginia man and a good friend of mine. But Byron and this other person, Blake, he kept his first name. Byron and Blake are the ones that hosted NXT Level Up until they stopped it about a month or so ago. But Byron and Blake still work together on Main Event, and now Vic Joseph is on there with Blake. It's okay that you don't know.
So it's not Vic Joseph.
Vic Joseph.
I don't know.
And it's okay because he's relatively new, and he has not made it yet to the main roster.
Got you.
Yes. Okay. So it will remain a tie, and you will have to bring me back to tell more stories because we haven't touched anything about Rick and partying with him. We haven't touched about JJ, Greg Valentine. I can go on and on and on.
We definitely have to do another interview. Yeah,
for sure.
So the young man that I'm talking about, his name is Blake Howard, and check him out. He's amazing. He's incredible. Living the dream, and all because he did things the right way. Your question was what prompted me to think about him, and I wanted to when we started this podcast, I wanted to brag about him, but then we got sidetracked. The importance of learning your craft, because the only way you're going to get to the top is by learning your craft. So, and he did. He's been doing this now for close to 20 years. And now look at him. He finally made it to the big stage. So answering your question, Tay, the importance of finding a great wrestling school, regardless whether you want to be a wrestler, a referee, a manager, an announcer, because eventually in the storylines, there's going to come a time that you're going to be involved physically in some fashion. And it's very important to know how to take the bumps properly. Look at Charles Robinson, the referee in WWE right now. Another, thank God, dear friend of mine. The last 2 months, he's been taking bumps almost every other Friday.
Yeah. Yes.
So it goes to finding a great wrestling school. I always recommend Kane. Oh, we didn't even tell the story about George Pantas and Undertaker and Kane, so you definitely have to bring me back.
Yes.
And Paul Bearer. So Kane has a school in Georgia with Bruce Pritchard's brother, Dr. Tom Pritchard, part of the Heavenly Bodies.
Yes.
Dr. Tom is the one that trained The Rock. We didn't even talk my rock story. Notice I'm throwing all these teasers in there to hook our fans listening.
Yes.
So they have an amazing school. I highly recommend Googling Dr. Tom Pritchard and Jacobs. Glenn Jacobs is Kane's real name. So it's Jacobs Richards Academy, I think. So that's a great one. Seth Rollins has a school in Ohio. I recommend that one. The key is you have to be sincere. If you want to be a weekend warrior, that's fine. But if this is what you want to do in life, for real, as we say out on the street, then you have to find a great school and you have to pay your dues. When I was in the classroom and The Rock's book came out, I was actually reading from The Rock's book and telling his story when it was time for me to do what I considered kind of like an English lesson reading, because there was a time when we were expected to read to the students. I chose that book because, when there's a reason why his company is called $7 Production, because he literally had $7 to his name. He talks about in his book of when he tried going up in Canada there for the football league, and it was a horrible situation. They had to go, he and his teammates had to go to hotels that had thrown out mattresses that were peed on and urinated and throw up and rain and everything. That's what he was sleeping on. But look at the man today. The most famous wrestling movie entertainer in the world, because he did it right. He learned the craft. He had his father teach him. He had Dr. Tom. And on and on and on and on. Mick Foley. Mick Foley left New York and drove 2,000 miles to go to Dominic DeNucci school and slept in his car. Hulk Hogan, when he wanted to break into wrestling, they literally, honest to goodness, broke his leg to test him to see how bad did he want this. The leg healed, and he went right back for more. So there's many examples like that out there. This is not a dance. This is not for the weak at heart. If you want to truly be a wrestler, then you find a great school, you commit your life to it, you commit to everything, and you then literally have to put yourself out there. Once you learn the craft, the best way to learn it is you got to go and work these independents. Whether you're wrestling in front of 50 people or 500 people, there's nothing like realizing that audience and how they react to what you're doing, and learning from the veterans. That's the other thing that I always say. Like, for example, when we bring in a Nikita, I always make sure the guys go and ask him to watch your match. She was at the top level. He'll give you the advice if you ask. So I always tell the young talent, ask these veterans to watch your matches. And that's what it takes to make it. There's a new WWE show, what is it? Legends and Future Legends?
Legends and Future Greats, LFG.
Yes.
Great. Full disclosure, I fought for a month watching it because I was afraid they would expose too much of the business. And I've always been kayfabe, and I've always been old school. And I've always been a believer that once you learn how the magic is done, it's just not the same. So I fought it, and about a week ago I started watching it, and I'm enjoying it a lot. They still show a little bit more than for my taste, but to hear the stories of the young men and the young ladies on there and their sacrifices, and they were already elite athletes in their own field, is heartwarming, and at the same time, that's what it takes to come into this business. When I was in the classroom and the students were asking me, the first thing I would tell them is, go out for the wrestling team. You need to learn this business, how to hook someone, the wrestling moves. The other stuff will fall in place, but you need to know it from the bottom up. It's like, if you're gonna go into the restaurant business, well, you better start working in the kitchen. Don't just buy the restaurant and think you're gonna make money. If you don't know how to cook, because that cook is not going to show up one day, and now what are you going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Your dishwasher just broke. Now what are you going to do? So it's understanding the business from the bottom up. The other advice I give the I give those that want to go into it is to volunteer, especially with these small promotions. They need hands to set up those chairs, to put up that ring, to take that ring down, to load it on the truck, to unload it. Those take time and hours. And without that ring, we can't have a show. So it's all of those things combined. That's the advice that I give those that want to go into the business. You have to, like in any profession, you do the volunteer because now you have eyes on you and people start to trust you. And then before you know it, opportunities appear right there.
Got you. Yeah, you have to put that work in.
Absolutely.
You have to put that work in. Well, Mr. Pantas, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been amazing.
It has. And listening to stories that I have never heard and that we have never talked about, and how WWE has obtained footage that we can see. I am going to go ahead and just put this out here now. If Snoop and Drew Carey can be WWE Hall of Famers, George Pantas can be a WWE Hall of Famer.
Absolutely.
From your mouth to the man upstairs.
And I would that is one Hall of Fame ceremony. That is one WrestleMania I will be there for.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You as the Iron Sheik, my Greek accent is coming out. As the original Iron Sheik used to say, you humble me. He would say he would humble the wrestler because he would beat them up. But I'll use it I'll paraphrase it. You humble me. Now you made me emotional. Thank you very much, because I know you're sincere. Thank you very much.
No, it's our pleasure. It really, really is.
Same here. Looking really forward to seeing this uploaded and sharing it with everyone. Thank you for inviting me. This was such a blessing, and to know the history that we have. And I don't think we fully explained it. So I was assistant principal at Spratman Middle School in Hampton, Virginia. And this handsome young man, Travis, was one of my little sixth grade students. So I was his sixth grader. Back then, we would follow our students. So I was his sixth grade assistant principal. That's why he called me his sixth grade principal. And then I became the seventh and eighth. And then they would graduate. He would go to Boo Phoebus. Just kidding. Crabber. I'm wearing today my Crabber tie in honor of our podcast. And so and then the loop would start over again, and I would have a new group of sixth graders.
Yeah,
so how amazing is God to bring us back together again like this? We of course reconnected on Facebook, but this is even more special to be able for us to do this together.
The feeling is mutual, sir. The feeling is very mutual. And I cannot thank you enough for being on the show today. We all have things going on, and I'm a believer of you make time for the things that you want to make time for. And I will say that we are very blessed to have you on, to have somebody who is rich in knowledge and rich in history to bless our situation, so our viewers and listeners can be educated on what it takes to be in this business for this long and have the longevity that you've had.
Amen. Thank you so much. We will do this again. We will tag team. We will have a not a triple threat, because we've got to include Teddy in there next month. So whatever. We're going to do a Texas tornado match where all four of us are in the ring at the same time.
For sure. A Texas tornado match. I love that. I love it. We got to do it.
We can do that.
But yes, we are definitely going to bring you back for a part 2. Everybody make sure that you connect with Mr. Pantas. All of that information is going to be in the description below. Make sure that you join Living the Gimmick's Facebook group. We are up and we are active there. If you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube. You know where to find us because we aren't hard to find. And remember, y'all, live the gimmick. Don't let the gimmick live you. Until next time. Bye.